Hello, beautiful soul, and welcome to yet another incredible episode of Howling at the Moon. I'm your host, Heather Leigh Strom, and today I've invited a couple of guests that I'm really excited to introduce you to. I can't wait to hear what they have to say about sacred geometry. We're going to be chatting with Gail and Gregory Hoag, and they have over 4 decades of dedicated expertise in the realm of sacred geometry. Gail and Gregory Hoag have pioneered groundbreaking technologies and new discoveries that have transformed the lives of tens of thousands across the globe with their teaching and tools. The Hoags skillfully reveal how the universal patterns displayed in sacred geometry play a foundational role in the evolution of consciousness. I am really excited to hear what they have to say about sacred geometry. I only recently began my investigation into this world, into this realm. So I'm really excited to have them here. Gregory and Gail, welcome to Howling at the Moon. I'm so excited to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Heather Leigh. And it's a great day to howl at the moon because we've got a full moon coming up that's quite powerful.
I felt it last night, actually. Yeah, it's already speaking to me. Well, I was really interested in having you on the show because just recently within my spiritual journey, I was being nudged and pushed to check out sacred geometry. And up until maybe 6 months ago, I didn't know anything about sacred geometry. And honestly, I really still don't know a lot. I'm just a baby as far as getting to know what it is, what it means, what you can do with it, how it affects us spiritually, you name it. So I'm really excited to pick your brain and learn from your decades of experience and research. So, can you start by just explaining to me and my audience what is sacred geometry?
Well, thank you. Thank you. And, I think there are a lot of people that are just beginning to have this interest in sacred geometry. Now, we've been working with this for over 40 years. So it's been a journey for us, and we've really looked at it from so many different levels. And where I like to start is that everything is energy. It's just pure, raw, formless energy. And in order for it to come into this physical dimension, because that energy is really on higher dimensional levels, it needs to come in a particular way, in a structure, in a way that it can create the functions that we have here in our bodies, on our planet, with everything around us. So sacred geometry is really the way that energy can take form. And what's so interesting about all this, it's not abstract form. Sacred geometry is a foundation that enables consciousness to create itself in a formed universe. And so, when we look back at architecture over, millennia, we can see that ancients were very drawn to understanding how architectural structures had an impact on people. So they would build temples, they would build pyramids, they would build different kinds of sacred places that supported people in being able to connect to the higher levels of who they are. The basic premise is that when we follow the way that energy naturally finds itself into form, that journey puts us closer to who we are at the soul level, at the multidimensional level, because we're actually in resonance with the way that things are. So resonance is a very important part of all of this, and sacred geometry instructs us as to how that energy finds itself in rhythms and patterns and cycles and different kinds of structural understandings, so that we can really find our way much more deeply into who we are. And, in terms of consciousness, when we wrote our book, we published a book in 2024 that's called Sacred Geometry, the Universal Language of Divine Alignment. And the first chapter, what we talk about is consciousness and how everything is consciousness. So you can never take that away from it. It is consciousness. And really, at the essence, that consciousness is love. That's what the universe is really providing for us to be able to create structurally with our soul vibration into this physical dimension.
Wow, there's so much to unpack there. Like, there's so many pieces to what you just said. And you've probably been doing this for so long that you forget what it's like for us, to kind of try and digest what you're saying. And even with my experience in the quantum realm, I still struggle with this. But the one thing you said that really caught my attention is that sacred geometry is the frame, the framework, the mold, I can't remember specifically how you said it, of consciousness. Did I get that correct?
Yeah.
It's in a way you can think of it as the vehicle for consciousness to come into the physical dimension. So we realize that consciousness is much more than what we can see, touch, and feel with our senses. And yet everything we do interact with our senses has particular form, has particular relationships, has particular cycles and rhythms and patterns. You don't wake up tomorrow and oxygen decides to change its atomic structure. It just wouldn't work. It doesn't work for atoms to be other than the structures that they are, the way they combine, the way everything in universe starts growing and interacting with what we call life has particular ratios, has particular geometries that we see in a plant, we see in an animal, we see in an insect, we see in ourselves, we see in the way DNA is structured. It follows these patterns. And so consciousness has chosen particular patterns that happen again and again and again. And so that's what sacred geometry is about, because everything is geometric. I mean, when you're in the physical dimension, your chair is a geometry. The book we're selling is a geometry. However, what we need to really understand is that, is this book the way universe always produces books? Or we go beyond that and go, well, what is it that happens in nature that we can learn from? And if we start following those patterns in our lives, if we surround ourselves with patterns that are reflective of the way creation does it, then we're going to be more harmonically in tune with what is. And that opens us up to more of who we are. So much of our potential is blocked from us because of our narrow focus on our senses. And yet, when we start dancing in universal rhythms, new things come into our senses on higher dimensional levels. And that's what's exciting when we start expanding into a fourth, fifth, sixth dimensional perspective, which allows us to look down on our lives just the way we would with a two-dimensional being. Say there is such a being that lives in only two dimensions. And if we were to draw a circle or a triangle on a piece of paper, all that being would see would be lines getting longer or shorter. It takes our third dimensional perspective to look down at that two-dimensional piece of paper, to see this is a circle, this is a triangle, this is a square. We can see into the interior from a higher perspective. And so it is once we start expanding toward our soul perspective. We can understand what Gregory and Heather are doing more than what we can when we're so glued to these characters. We have a limited view, and sacred geometry is the geometry we're choosing that aligns us with the sacred, with consciousness. And that's what makes geometry sacred, is when we start aligning with the archetypical aspects of creation.
So, which comes first? Is it consciousness that comes first and then sacred geometry, or is consciousness fitting within sacred geometry?
You know, the way that I look at it, and
Okay.
you know, this sounds like kind of a chicken or the egg sort of
Yeah.
question, but
And
I'm going to take it on because I think that to begin with, everything is energy, pure formless energy, right? We can agree on that one, right? And that energy is consciousness. You can't have any living form without consciousness, right?
Right.
And so there's consciousness embodied in this energy. But now, where does it go? What do you make of it? How does it transform? How does it get transduced into this physical dimension, into the different dimensions that we can potentially operate on? So I would say that everything really does initiate based on consciousness. And the thing to keep in mind too, that's so really interesting about all this, it's a very dynamic system that we live in, that we are, that consciousness is, that energy is. It may start out as formless, and yet it has all potential, just like when you work with the quantum field. It has all potential.
Yeah.
And where are you going to focus it? Wherever you come into relationship with that energy, it grows, it starts to move into something, and it's never stagnant. Stagnation creates death, basically. So life is about constant transformation, constant evolution. And so the parameters for life to take on has to have something that gives it the opportunity to move and change and grow and all the things that we experience. And yet it can't be pure chaos. It has to have those rhythms and those cycles and the different ratios and things that show us over and over in nature how nature creates itself, how plants and animals and rocks and trees and everything are all based on, we are based on these ratios and rhythms. So we have standards, we have laws, we have these foundational structures. And with that, they don't confine us. They are the trampoline for us. They give us the opportunity to go and create in just extraordinary ways that in some cases seem pretty unpredictable.
Yeah. I'm just curious because I want to see if I'm getting this concept correctly in my mind. As our consciousness changes, expands and broadens and grows, our sacred geometry is also changing with that elevated state, correct? Or does that change as much?
So, perception gives us more and more of an understanding and more power, in a sense. Rumi said it very well when he said, "You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the ocean in a drop." That is the nature of us holographically as our consciousness expands. As our consciousness expands, we start to realize we do have universal access to everything. And the way this universe is playing with us is in a particular pattern and rhythm and cycle that is unique to what the human condition has created and needs for its parameters of growth and understanding and expression of love. And so we have these same parameters existing, whether we were to go to the other side of the universe and communicate with another civilization. We could use these things we call sacred geometry to communicate, because we'd be talking about patterns and rhythms and cycles that are universal. However, they're universal to this universe. We are a drop, and not in the ocean, but the ocean in the drop. We are the universe in this embodiment, this universe. But there are so many, it's endless what creation, what consciousness has created. That's where we have to really take some sense of that word infinite. It's beyond any end. It's beyond any understanding. And yet our unique position in this universe is to play with unique parameters that we know that 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 are going to work out the same. You're going to have this as 5, and we just define it as 5, but we go across the universe and this stays the same, or this, or this. And the way these numbers express themselves around certain archetypes, it's like 1 is source, unknowable. 2 is the dichotomy. 2 is a feminine principle that really works about being receptive, but it works on so many different aspects working with 2, and you can play with each of the numbers. You can play with their expressions geometrically, and they all do similar things with certain number of degrees and a certain number of miles in the diameter of the moon and the earth and the sun, all relating to certain geometries. And so it points to the fact that so many of the things that we think we've invented, like degrees 360 in a circle, are actually an archetype. There were 360 degrees in a circle before the earth was created. And that doesn't make sense in people's heads. A scientist says, no, we defined the mile in the Roman era. But no, you didn't. It doesn't work like that, because right now I can show you how certain geometries have defined a mile. I mean, it just goes on. And again, it comes back to just understanding how the universe is playing, so we can play with it and expand the level of play that we enjoy in our lives. Because that's, I think all of us, we made much better children than we did adults sometimes, because we knew how to play. And that's, I think, something we need to always hang on to, because Lord knows the universe certainly loves to play.
Yeah, and what you just said there leads me into another question I have, is what exactly comprises sacred geometry? Is it a number? Is it a shape? Is it a color? What is it we're talking about here?
Everything. There is,
Everything.
there is nothing that cannot be understood through the lens of sacred geometry. And so I'm talking about everything in the physical dimension. I mean, sound has certain frequencies that relate to certain geometries.
Right.
Hans Jenny and cymatics demonstrated that. And there are so many things going on with frequencies in the spectrum of energy. And there are certain frequencies in certain realms, in hertz is the way we measure frequency. And you get to a certain level and you come into the spectrum we see with our eyes. We see colors. But before that, there's a frequency that affects us that's called radio waves. Beyond that, there are other frequencies called X-rays and gamma waves. And they are all part of the electromagnetic spectrum. They are all carried by something called a photon. That's the compact unit of measure. The singularity of the energy spectrum is a photon. And a photon has geometry. It has a geometry that when you measure that geometry in degrees, it comes out to 4,320 degrees on the surface of a photon. Now, if you take the radius of the sun that creates these photons, it's 432,000 miles. If you take 432 and square it, you get 186,600, I think, 40 some miles, which is within 0.02% of what Einstein said was the speed of light. So you see 432 as a speed working with time when
Yeah.
it's squared, 432 working as a distance in miles, 432 working as degrees in a geometry. They're all harmonically resonant across different aspects that we wouldn't even think would be related.
Yeah.
Why should distance in miles be related to degrees in geometry, be related to time, speed, and yet it is. The universe harmonically resonates with all aspects of itself. And what happens when you have harmonic resonance is transfer of energy. Energy moves. That's what happens with a C tuning fork. You can be holding it there, just a C tuning fork, and then you play a C tone on, say, a piano or another instrument, or just generate it through a frequency generator, and you do it right, this tuning fork starts to vibrate. So what we're saying is when we hit the harmonic resonance that is keeping your cells going, that is keeping your consciousness active, that is working with different aspects of your being, you start to vibrate with universal rhythms. And it's like, wow, we're so blocked from these rhythms. That's part of the issue with what's going on with all the concern about 5G and electromagnetic frequencies.
Yeah.
They're just so ubiquitous, they block out natural rhythms. When you let your
Oh,
when you let your cell phone alone, when you go away from your apartment or your home and you go out into nature and you sit next to a brook and you're under a tree and the wind is blowing through the tree and there's negative ions floating around you and the water's bubbling and the birds are singing, it's like, wow, I feel really good. And one of the reasons you feel so good is you're in the world in a way that is right. It's natural. Everything is doing what it's supposed to be doing, which allows you to do what you want to do, which is just be you, to feel
yeah.
things, to smell things, to taste things, to understand things maybe in a more expanded way. And so that's what we are attempting to do with some of the things we build, like these geometries next to me.
Yeah.
They're antenna systems, just like the antennas we used to put up to catch TV frequencies or
Yeah.
radio frequencies.
Right.
Now everything is streamed, but that still means that someone is using towers to send frequencies. They're transducing them. They're bringing them from one level into another level so that you can interrelate with them. There are images running through the air right now, but we can't see them until they get stepped down and put through certain things. Used to have to put it through a whole, you know, projection tube that was so big, and these TVs were so big and heavy. Now they're small and flat. Now they're the size of our phone. And it's
Yeah.
like everything that this is doing is just playing with frequencies. And sometimes what happens in modern technology is these frequencies take over our life. They become our life. They become an extension of our being, and it keeps us from experiencing the bigger parts of our being. Because sometimes they keep us locked in. And then there are toxins that come along with all of this. And these toxins limit what the cells can do. The toxins limit the levels we can go into. And so we need ways to overcome the toxins, the judgments, the fears, all the things that are the human condition and the modern technology that has corralled us into a very small little expression of our being. And to run free outside of that, that's what we have been doing for the last 40 years by bringing these tools and things we're wearing into our lives so that we can have frequencies that will help us go beyond.
That's phenomenal. Thank you, Gregory. There's so many questions I have, and I want to talk some more about
Yeah.
how we can use sacred geometry to improve our lives. But let's take a really quick break here. And when we come back, we're going to dig into that, okay? All right, stay put, everybody. We'll be right back.
Canine Spirit Guides, The Healing Power of Man's Best Friend by Heather Leigh Strom. We've always suspected dogs are magical angels from God. In this groundbreaking book, you'll discover the specific divine gifts our canine companions really possess as they facilitate our healing, elevate our awareness, and expand our consciousness. Man's best friend has their own spirit guides, which is why they appear in our lives just when we need them most. This award-winning book, Canine Spirit Guides, The Healing Power of Man's Best Friend by Heather Leigh Strom, is available on Amazon.com and HeatherLeighStrom.com. Get your copy today and begin your journey.
All right, welcome back, everybody. I'm so excited to have Gregory and Gail here sharing with us all their knowledge about sacred geometry. And now I'm really, really curious, you guys, after what you just shared, how can we use sacred geometry to improve our lives, to elevate our consciousness, to make this planet a better, a more satisfying place to live?
That's really where we've dedicated our 40 years of working with sacred geometry. It's like, well, what is this? What's the value of it? What's our purpose here?
Yeah.
And, I think to start with, just to give you a little background, um, nobody sat us down and said, you should have a career in sacred geometry. I think that would have been a little strange. Might have been, actually, it could have been helpful.
Yeah.
Instead, we came across things that inspired us. Gregory had an experience having gone through Kundalini where he started seeing these different geometries. I was reading the work of Buckminster Fuller and was fascinated with it and saw that this was showing me how universe is created and how energy comes into form and all kinds of things. And I wanted to understand, well, great, what do you do with it?
Yeah.
So when Greg and I met back in 1985, he had been making these different three-dimensional geometries that we call sacred geometry. And they were different tetrahedrons. And so I looked at these and I put my hand over them and I could feel something. I could feel the energy that was coming off the tips of these different forms. So being a curious person, I looked at that and went, wow, well, if I can feel something, what can I do with this? And we started to uh, experiment and also intuitively tune in. I had actually been working as a channel. And so I was, going to higher dimensions and asking for information. Well, what is this? What do we do with it? And some of these structures were amazing for how they could help you get into meditation really quickly.
Wow.
Yeah, or different healing modalities. Um, Connecting in with the higher aspects of who we are became easier. When we had them in our environment, people would walk in and go, wow, something feels different here. This place feels really good. What are you guys doing?
Yeah.
All these different geometries in our environment, or we put them outside in different specific points that might have been like on what we considered vortexes or power points. And so we started doing more research, because we wanted to understand, well, how do we teach people about this? What do we do with it? And we did some training, some learning with a man named Keith Critchlow, John Michel, who back in the, early and mid 80s were fabulous teachers from England who talked about sacred geometry and looked at it in some ways from an architectural perspective or looking at it from a spiritual perspective, how the Islamic tradition had used some of these different geometries and patterns, and they became something they called magic carpets, where people could be on them and they could elevate into higher dimensions. Well, wow, that was pretty
That's
cool.
cool.
We can get to these different places without drugs and different things like that, like
Yeah.
that's good. So that really was kind of like very pivotal for us to learn more and more. And so we found that we have a whole array of different products that we've created over the years. And some of them are just amazing for helping us with our healing journey or our conscious evolution journey. Or we have one form called the 5G solution. And what it does is it helps us stay connected so that all those different energies, those electromagnetic energies that are vibrating around us, aren't dominating us. Instead, these geometries are helping to keep us connected so that when we're connected, then we have access to all the natural frequencies that
Yeah.
are important for us, for our health, our well-being, and for our spiritual and conscious evolution. So, so that's really where we have been going with all of this over the years. And a number of years ago, we worked with these different three-dimensional geometries and then thought, is there a way that we could create something that people can have with them all the time? And so we started with a pendant and a piece that someone could put in their pocket that contained the different geometries that we had been discovering. And we put different antenna systems in there and all kinds of stuff that we learned how to do. And what it did was it helped us stay connected. And when we're connected, then our intuition is just, it's really getting out there. It's really
Yeah.
supporting us in connecting with those higher dimensional levels of who we are. It helped. I remember the first time I wore the pendant, one of the things that just was amazing, astonished me was that I stopped procrastinating. All of a sudden, my purpose became front and center, much more
Wow.
vibrant. Well, yeah, I wasn't as distracted. When we're connected, we are not distracted. That's one of the things that's really important. And I think it's particularly important for the time that we're in because there are so many distractions going on
Yeah.
out there. And what's most important is that we're coming from our center. We're coming from the essence of who we are. We're coming from soul.
Mhm.
And so the more connected we are, the better. And connection doesn't mean that you have to be in meditation or like in some kind of very, very deep state. It means that you've found a way to really feel centered in whatever moment so that you you have a recognition, there's a resonance where you are able to be who you are.
Mhm.
Because when it comes down to it, we're souls that have come into this dimension, and it's the soul that we want to be focused on,
Mhm.
not personality and, the job and, all the things that we have around us in the physical realm. But it's really the essential, genuine beingness that we want to be thriving from. And sacred geometry is, for me, it's the most profound way to stay connected. And like I said earlier, the ancients understood this.
Mhm.
And so they created these temples and these, amazing places so that people could gather and come together and really explore who they are at that higher dimensional level and bring it into everyday life. That's what's really important to do, not just have to take ourselves off into retreat, but to be here with that higher evolutionary level of who we are.
Yeah, to live in that frequency full
Live in
time.
that frequency.
So are you talking about, like, jewelry pieces? Do you have anything you can show us?
This is what we're wearing. And
Oh,
this is one piece of jewelry with a front and a back. And
wow.
so the reason it has two sides is the side that is toward your body is going to affect the way energy flows through your body, where it's either moving down and it's feeling more grounded. You're more connected to the earth. You're more present in your physical body and your heart center. The other direction, the side in this image on your left with the star, that takes you into a higher dimensional realm. It takes you into a space that's more mental, higher vibrational that way. And what's wonderful about this particular pendant, we've had a number of different ones over the years, and this one is particularly aligned with the divine feminine. And so the star side is much softer to me. It makes it easier to have that toward my body. And that's what's toward my body right now when I'm speaking it. It just keeps things more clear and focused and present. And the geometries that you're seeing on these pendants, there are all these different patterns. And we've gotten used to two-dimensional patterns being sacred geometry, but in most cases, they really are very lacking because 2D doesn't carry energy the way three-dimensional forms do.
Mhm.
So we found a way to take a geometry that's three-dimensional, say like here's a cube, and I've picked a cube right now to show you because it's pretty simple and we can all see that it has four different perspectives that if we project those perspectives on a non-conductive surface with a conductive material, and in this case, we have one side that is a square, another side that is a rectangle, that is very particular. This rectangle, if I divide the length by the width, it's going to give me the square root of 2. And it's got two little rectangles in it that also have our square root of 2 rectangles. Or I could bring it in this direction.
Wow.
And you
Yeah.
see now it's a hexagon. And if I take the distance from one side to the other and I divide that by the width, I'm going to have this square root of 3. But it has different geometric proportions. It has different patterns. And when I have those 3 patterns, so you see this geometry and this big geometry and this geometry are 3 perspectives of one form. And over
Oh,
here, I have this geometry, and this geometry are the same geometry. I'm just looking at them in different ways. It's kind of like if you were to want someone to build a house for you, you would give them plans, you give them the floor plans, but you got to give them the elevations too,
mhm.
an X, a Y, and a Z axis. So that's what we're doing to be able to capture 3-dimensional energy in a 2-dimensional algorithm, a 2-dimensional antenna system. But
Wow.
we found how to do that. Inside these pendants, we have oscillating crystals. I have photon generator. I have photovoltaic material running through titanium coils. And, the photons run through there, generate frequencies between different geometries that I have inside. And it just goes on and on. And
Wow.
then we actually have a chamber on our land where we have many different geometries running, and we put these pendants for a half a day so that they can be in that frequency and energy. And this chamber connects to the grid system of the planet. So we're actually working with a planetary grid system that is very similar to the circulatory system of a human being or our acupuncture system, which,
Yeah.
the Oriental cultures have worked with and mapped for years. And those maps of the different acupuncture, meridian points, etc., they don't align with the other things that we've seen in the West with our nervous system, our circulatory system, some of our other systems, but it is another system. And so what we found is that there are ways to tap into that with energy. And it just, you feel it. You notice the difference when you start working with some of these tools.
That
And
sounds phenomenal.
it's like, what's fun is it comes into just having us be more of who we are. Like this one grandmother said, what I love about the pendant is my grandkids used to run away from me when I visited. Now they crawl all over me. They're just attracted to the energy. We don't realize how much of our reality is a function of our energy. You
Mhm.
shift your energy, it becomes higher vibrational, it becomes more open.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, other things, maybe you don't have grandkids to run in, but you have other things that
Mhm.
come into your life because they're attracted to the new you. I had this one couple buy a pendant, and in their late 70s, early 80s, when they came back to get something else, he leaned over and said, "What I love about the pendant is my wife doesn't yell at me as much anymore." And she overheard us and said, "I don't have to." So did he change? Did she change? They both changed and they did not realize, but they recognized that change in the old parameters of the way they work with things, in relationship, in being, and how we do things in the world. All of a sudden, things start coming about in different ways when we change our frequency. And
Yeah.
sacred geometry helps us understand that by doing all these different things that we've been doing with numbers and geometries and form. It's like we realize this is the way consciousness has been playing this game forever.
And it sounds like the sacred geometry helps us to align to that vibration. so that we can get there easier.
Sacred geometry is what we feel, what we experience when we're having that walk out in nature that helps us get back to center, find our authentic self, be able to thrive again. And it's all about how energy has found this absolutely magnificent way to come from those higher level dimensions and impress itself into this physical world that we happen to have found ourselves in. And so it's like a homecoming in a way, and it
Yeah.
makes us understand who we really are.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Why don't we tell people how they can get a copy of your book about sacred geometry?
That would be great. Well, if they would like to get a copy of the book where we'll sign it for them, then they can go to our website, which is iconnecttoall.com. And that's the letter I, the word connect, the number 2, and the word all, ALL.com. And we do also have on our website a place where they can get in to get a free copy of our first chapter. And that first chapter, as I mentioned earlier, is what is consciousness? So we start out there. It's a nice, easy way to get into sacred geometry before we get into more of the, the math and the science and all kinds of other stuff that we'll get into. And so we invite people to do that.
And what
And
about your pendants? Can they get your pendants on your webpage?
they can, there's a tab on our website that says shop. And at the very top in the drop down, it'll say jewelry and there's pendants. We call them heart and soul companions. And there's a lot of different variations with different gems. And the technology of the pendants are the same with how we create them on both the inside and the outside, but then we give people some different choices with whether they like silver or gold, how many gemstones they like on there. And so they can check that out and see what appeals to them.
Marvelous. I've got to go check that out, and I cannot wait to read your book.
Wonderful. Good. Good,
Yeah.
good.
So I just want to thank you again for joining us today and sharing all of your wisdom. It's just so obvious how much you've put into this, how long you've been working with this. The scope of your knowledge is beyond many things that I've run into in my path, I must say. And I do believe you were before your time, because I don't think many people were thinking the way you were at that point.
Trust me, they weren't. When we used to show them some of these tools that we had, people would walk by and they'd go, wow, that's really beautiful. What is it? And we'd tell them a little about what it was. And they just have this glazed look on their face. And they go, what?
And we weren't getting it from anywhere but higher self.
Yeah.
It was what I went through with Kundalini that opened me up. It was coming through my body so strongly. I had holes being burned in my hands and my feet from the energy just moving
Wow.
through my body. And what came along with that was all these patterns, this understanding. The consciousness on these higher realms started sharing information, answering questions, and that's what it became for Gail and I. We
Yeah.
work together in doing all of this and fill in the blanks for each other and help, flesh out the understanding of what they really want us to do.
Yeah. That's a beautiful concept for us to end on today, because we really are all one. Even those of us who aren't human, we are all one. This is a massive quantum realm that we live in, and once we embrace that, there's so much we have access to. So your work is bringing this forward. Your pendants are assisting us, and I've got to get one for myself, maybe my husband. I mean, it's just incredible the work that you're doing, and I just really want to acknowledge all of your dedication and your expertise and the time that you've put into this. And thank goodness you have each other. That's is so
Yeah,
beautiful to have someone to share this journey with.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So everybody check out their webpage and check out the pendants. Get one for yourself. And thank you for joining us. And thank you for sharing your message with my audience on Howling at the Moon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Lots of love
allowing
and
us
blessings.
to truly howl.
Again, I want to really thank Gregory and Gail Hoag for joining us today and sharing all of their incredible knowledge about sacred geometry. I look forward to having more conversations with them in the future. And please be sure and check out their book. I know I can't wait to read it. If you're enjoying my program, please be sure to add it to your library, share it with your friends, and make sure to come back every week for another exciting episode, either with a compelling guest or advanced energetic frequencies with the Canine Spirit Guides. And as always, if you're looking for more, check out my webpage, heatherleigstrom.com, where you can learn more about my one-on-one offerings, my group events, my programs, and my memberships. I'm Heather Leigh Strom. Be sure to elevate your frequency and transform your reality. Be your best out there. Love ya.